Touchdown, buzzer beater, do it all now. All now, top corner talking home run. Touchdown, buzzer beater, do it all now. All now, top corner like ooh.
All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday Report.
I'm your host, H. James K., and this is episode 4.
It is Monday, February 17th, 2025, and on today's episode, we are talking about sports movies, the good and the bad. So sports movies are a genre of film that you either absolutely love or you cannot stand. And honestly, the reasons are probably the same, as funny as that sounds. Like, I love sports films because of the struggle and the triumphing over adversity and self-discovery and growth, and I love stories like that. But even I can admit there are good sports movies and there are bad sports movies, and not all bad sports films are created equal. Generally, sports films that are bad can be broken down into a few reasons why they're bad. The first is a lack of understanding, of not understanding the assignment. Like, Any Given Sunday by Oliver Stone is one that I think doesn't understand what it's supposed to be doing. Like, it portrays the game of football, but it doesn't portray the game of football accurately. Like, the injuries are crazy exaggerated, and the disputes with players on the field and players and coaches and the overly dramatic nature of the movie just generally exaggerates everything about a game that doesn't need exaggeration. The game itself is its own storyteller. It crafts, every single game you watch crafts a story. You just have to watch for the game. So when a movie like Any Given Sunday decides to throw away all of the things that make football a great storytelling medium and replace them with cheap interpersonal drama between players and unrealistic character arcs and overly brutal injuries and crazy harsh, tackling that's way beyond anything that would have been seen even in the 90s, it ultimately hurts the film. Any Given Sunday has one of the great sports movie speeches about life is a game of inches. And we'll get on to the whole final speech before the game thing. We'll get to that later. But it's one of these movies where it commits the cardinal sin of just choosing not to take the assignment seriously and to make a Hollywood film about football, not a football movie. Because there are other movies that take the game of football more seriously, who try to do a better job of either telling a personal story in a grounded manner or displaying the actual game well and that understand the assignment. Worse than a lack of understanding is inaccuracy. Arguably, the worst, most inaccurate sports movie I have ever seen is a little-known IndyCar film called Driven, starring Sylvester Stallone and Burt Reynolds and God, I don't even remember who else was in that movie. It was so bad, and it is a movie that was written by someone who has no understanding of motorsports, who chooses not to have any understanding of motorsports. The inaccuracies in the movie are so numerous and so onerous that anyone who is even a passive motorsports fan will not be able to watch the movie because it's so bad. For instance, IndyCar tires, like any other racing tire, are precision made. The size of the tires are specifically designed to do, whether it's turning left, so the tires on the right side of the car are bigger than on the left to help the car turn, or on a road course, the tires are angled a specific way, and there's very narrow tolerances with the tires. But in Driven, Sylvester Stallone, they're at Road America, one of the great racetracks in America, a 4-mile long road course. It's beautiful. It's in Wisconsin. He drives on the track to prove a point, and he tosses a quarter onto a corner, onto one of the turns, and he does an entire lap. And then when he comes back around to that corner, he drifts through the turn and picks up the quarter with his back tire, the quarter being imprinted into the tire. Now, there are a couple of things wrong with this. One, drifting in an Indy car is stupid. It's slow, it's dangerous, and it's just burning up the tires for no good reason. 1. 2, picking up a quarter with the tires would give you a vibration that would literally shake your bones to dust. That's hyperbole, but the vibration would be so bad the car would be undrivable. A real-world example of this, at the Indy 500 back in 2019 or 2018, Canadian driver James Hinchcliffe was trying to qualify for the race, and a tire sensor broke off inside one of his tires and was vibrating, and the car was so hard to drive, he had to go into the pits and he failed to qualify. He didn't make the race. That's how bad a vibration is. This movie, Driven, is so inaccurate. Later on in the film, there's a crash, and the guy who's leading the race parks his car, gets out, and dives into a pond because the guy who crashed, his car flew into a pond and caught fire. So the guy who's leading the race gets out of his car, endangers himself to get the driver out of the pond, when in actuality, the safety crew would do that. It would be unsafe for him to park his car on the track and run across the track and dive into the pond to save this guy. It's completely inaccurate. It would never, ever happen. And the movie has so many things like this that it is almost incoherent. It has no understanding of the assignment, no understanding, no appreciation for what it's trying to do. And this is a problem that is pervasive in so many films. Like Days of Thunder is another one, where like every time Cole Trickle needs to pass somebody, he shifts into another gear. At Daytona, you never shift. You are in full throttle, 4th gear or 5th gear all the time. So there's no shifting at a lot of tracks in NASCAR. But in Days of Thunder, every time he needs to pass somebody, shifts into another gear. He must have a 57 gear transmission because he's constantly banging away at those gears. It's the little things like that. The lack of accuracy, the lack of intent to get the story right is what can hurt a lot of films. Now, beyond inaccuracy, there's a more subtle thing that can make a bad film. Adherence to expected tropes. Now, everyone knows there are certain tropes that sports films all invariably adhere to, like the team gets together, there's friction, but there's a bonding moment. Things go well, then there's a setback. The team has to overcome. The head coach gives a rousing speech, and the team wins the game. We Are Marshall is an offender of this. So is Any Given Sunday, where there's the final triumphant speech that you know never freaking happened like it does in the movies, because real life isn't like that, where they have the rousing speech and then the team that's horrible just magically overcomes. Now, in reality, Marshall did win that game against Xavier back in like 1973 or whenever that movie was taking place. I don't remember. But the things like that, the structure of those films, get together, struggles, overcome, new setbacks, rousing speech, victory, ultimate victory. It cheapens the experience of what might otherwise be a great film. It's one of these things where it's lazy writing, because the tragedy of the Marshall Thundering Herd doesn't need expected tropes. There is so much to that story of like rebuilding a team from scratch. You don't need the extra fluff. It's what separates the good films from the bad films. Now, what makes a sports film a great sports film? Well, having a clear creative vision. The movie Grand Prix from like 1963, I think, is a film about Formula One, and it is a long film with incredible onboard camera shots of actual Formula One cars before that was really a thing. It is a movie that, it's a personal drama, but it has a creative vision to tell the story of the danger of Formula One by putting you in the car and doing something that had never been done before and not sticking to the actual, like, the tropes of sport films. You know, there isn't like the good things happen, bad things happen, good things happen, bad things happen, rousing speech, then they overcome and win the race. It isn't like that. In actuality, without spoiling too much, Grand Prix is kind of a tragic film. It's a brilliant film. Long, but every one of you should watch Grand Prix. It's brilliant, especially if you're a fan of racing like I am. Another movie like this is Moneyball. Moneyball has a clear creative vision to tell a story the right way, while also taking creative liberties to compress what would be an unwieldy story into something that is palatable. Like, Jonah Hill's character is a composite of about 12 or 13 people, because Billy Beane fired a whole bunch of people and brought in all these new scouts and everything to bring Moneyball to the Oakland Athletics. It would be hard to introduce like 15 new characters to a movie, so they just compress all of them down into one character played by Jonah Hill, who's Pete. And other than that, the film is great because it goes to intense lengths to capture the essence of baseball. It shows reverence to the game of baseball. It goes to great lengths to be accurate to the game, to tell the story right, to portray events accurately. Even casting guys like the guy who plays, not the guy who plays David Justice, but the guy who plays the pitcher with the weird throwing motion. They cast someone who has an uncanny resemblance to the actual pitcher. That way they can use both television footage from back in the day and footage they shot at a ballpark. It's the little things like that, the creative vision, the way the story is constructed, the where it ends, the tone of it, the visual styling. It's a movie that understands what it's trying to do, tries to be accurate, does a good job of being accurate, which is the difference. Other than Grand Prix and Moneyball, you have a movie called Winning. Now, full disclosure, I am a massive, huge, lifelong IndyCar fan. I've been to the Indianapolis 500 14 times. I'm a huge fan, so I'm a little biased. I will admit, I am biased towards Winning. But Winning is a film starring Paul Newman, Robert Wagner, and Joanne Woodward from 1969 about a racing driver played by Paul Newman who is qualifying and racing the Indianapolis 500. And he meets this woman, and they get married, and there's struggles, but that's just kind of the secondary B plot. And it's about the struggles of qualifying in Indianapolis and racing the race, because the Indianapolis 500 is one of the most grueling, hard-to-win races in the world. It's beyond difficult. I'll go into that in May when it's IndyCar season. But the movie has a great understanding of what IndyCar was like. So, like, it's in its little things, like how it portrays bumping into the field with qualifying, I should say. Bumping is its own thing that'll be explained in May when we get to Indy month. But it goes into lengths about qualifying and how the cars are tuned and manufactured and run, and like the little things about towards the end of the movie, he comes back for her. She lives in Wisconsin. He goes back for her after Indianapolis, and she says, "I thought you'd be in Milwaukee." He says, "Yeah, well, everyone goes to Milwaukee because after the Indianapolis 500, historically, everyone went to the Milwaukee Mile." And it's these little things that make the movie a great ode to 60s Indianapolis 500, to 60s IndyCar racing, because it does so much to portray the race as it actually is without having to overly dramatize the actual on-field action. And from an accuracy standpoint, they used footage from the 1968 Indianapolis 500 to craft their story. So all the footage of the racing you see is real race footage, which I think is brilliant. But it's one of these things where, and it's, full disclosure, it's not a great film. From an objective standpoint, Joanne Woodward's subplot with Paul Newman is kind of not contrived, but doesn't add a whole lot. And some of the acting is not great. But as a film about IndyCar racing, it's brilliant because it actually does what it needs to do well to capture that sport well, to portray that sport well, which is, I think, important because not having a clear vision, not trying to be accurate, not trying to tell the story right, even if you have a brilliantly written script, hurts the film, detracts from the film. Which is why sometimes you can have movies that are maybe not as big and as broad and as grand as they could be, but they do a good job of telling their story and being accurate. And it greatly helps the film. Now, largely, sports films have kind of gone the way of the dodo bird because, one, it's hard to please audiences with sports films because, well, sports are everywhere. We watch sports all the time. And two, they don't make a lot of money. Sports films don't make a lot of money at all. So what you see happening is you have like Draft Day. Draft Day with Kevin Costner, great film. Didn't make a lot of money. So like what you'll see is The Boys on the Boat came out last year about the Washington Huskies college rowing team who won the Olympics and the Berlin Olympics in 1936. Brilliant film. Small film, made no money. Because there's just not as much money in sports films anymore when we can get all the sports we can handle on television. Ultimately, though, I think the sport genre of film is not going anywhere. It is smaller than it used to be. Like, we had Ford v Ferrari, which was a great film, but like the movie about Ferrari with Adam Driver made no money. It was a brilliant film, but it made no money. Ferrari, the movie Ferrari. So it's one of these things where, for those of us who are sports fans who like sports cinema, we have to support this genre, which I think it's important. We have to support the genre of sports films because otherwise they'll go the way rom-coms did, where no one goes to rom-coms, so we don't make rom-coms, which then further reinforces, man, nobody makes rom-coms anymore. Well, I don't care about them because no one makes them anymore for a reason, kind of thing, and the cycle continues and continues. Anyway, I think I'm going to wrap it up. So we'll do more of these Absolute Cinema episodes from time to time. We'll just call this Absolute Cinema number 1 because there are many, 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 many sports films. There's Rudy and Remember the Titans and all the Natural and all sorts of sports films that we can talk about and discuss and get into greater detail about their own positives and negatives. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for dedicating your time and attention to my product. For those of you listening on YouTube, please consider subscribing, like, comment, do the whole thing. For those of you listening on Apple Music and Spotify, thank you for searching me out. Thank you for listening. I greatly appreciate it. The next episode, episode 5, the 5th episode for Monday, February 17th, 2025, will be Daytona Days, Thoughts on the Great American Race, where we will discuss the Daytona 500 that happened yesterday, while also giving my thoughts on the race as a whole, the direction of the race, and a historical perspective on the Daytona 500.
Until next time.